think all of those struggles really helped me to realize that I'm way more than an artist. I'm a human being, and my masterpiece is my life. And every single human being who's present is part of this incredible artwork, and we must listen to and embrace because they're all there. We're all here. I think if institutions, and all of us actually, all of us throughout the industry, and even amateurs and students, could just remember that our life is the most important thing, and the lives of others are the most important thing that we can engage with, then I think we'll start to cultivate the culture that you're talking about, that we want, full of life again.
That was Omar Shahryar. One way to describe Omar is as a composer, facilitator, and peacemaker. One of his specialties is composing for young audiences, and not only does he compose for young people, but he is also one of the few composers out there who facilitates, that's the facilitator part, in case you were wondering what that meant, facilitates children composing their own music, even without prior knowledge of music notation and theory. This specialization has led to participatory projects with some of the leading opera houses and concert venues in the UK, including the Barbican, Royal Festival Hall, Glyndebourne, the Royal Opera, and Wigmore Hall. He is the founder and artistic director of Opera Schmopera and wrote, and also facilitated actually, the opera A Shoe Full of Stars, with libretto by Ed Harris and with some passages co-composed by children who performed in it. It was an opera about terrorism, and especially children's reactions to terrorism, and won the Yama Award Prize for Best Opera for Young People in 2018. Omar and I met sometime in June 2020, when we were both tuned into one of those desperate Corona Zoom calls with various folks from the opera industry. Afterwards, Omar asked me and a couple other people on the call to brainstorm with him one-on-one about a way forward during the pandemic. The conversation we had ended up planting the seed for the idea behind this podcast and really marked a turning point in my thinking about the value of art and even my individual path as an artist, which is why I thought it would be especially appropriate to have Omar on as my very first guest. On this episode, we discuss many of the subjects of that initial fateful conversation. We talk about the meaning and importance of an education in the arts, letting go of the perfection and expectations drilled into academically trained artists, rethinking the idea of an audience, and don't worry, we also talk about getting that all-important funding for indie projects. All the music on this episode is composed, or at the very least facilitated, by Omar. And at the very end, you'll even hear a little long-distance keyboard and voice improv, which we managed to dash off after our conversation. I started my interview with the question, what led you to carve out this unique path for yourself outside the confines of a traditional career in classical music?
Whatever I've done, I've always been a musician. It all started at university, when I was just throwing myself into every single thing that music could offer. And the music department at the University of York is, I think, one of the most open and visionary possibly in the world. So it wasn't just musicking that we were doing. We were talking about music, we were dancing, we were composing, we were making shows, making skits, making movies, um, anything that you could do attached to music, including programming, marketing, digital design, all kinds of stuff. So it all started there. And then I suppose when it comes to opera in itself is so multi-form, multi-art form. Uh, I just couldn't help myself but try to be a part of every single aspect of it. And all the while, I have been inspired to teach others, basically because that's where it all started for me. I had great teachers when I was a kid, and there was a very formative moment when a wonderful music teacher, Mrs. Webster, when I was 9 years old, entered the class into a songwriting competition, a national songwriting competition, and the prize was a keyboard for you and your co-writer and the school, and then this big festival where everyone would sing your song, and I won. and I wrote a song about peace with my friend, and it was only about 20 years later that I realized that it was actually mainly my mum who wrote that
Oh.
song, and she just facilitated us so effortlessly that we believed wholeheartedly that we came up with every single aspect of this song. And actually, that's basically what I do now. I'm a composer, but I facilitate other people to compose, and that's my main joy. I love composing things for other people, but I love more than anything facilitating someone else to believe and to be convinced and feel confident in the fact that they are composers too. So I've been doing that as, since university, and then, as I say, with the opera career, um, I was first a director, and I wanted to understand the craft and the training, what you do on a stage from all aspects. Um, and I did that fundamentally. This is a little side. I did that fundamentally because I had no confidence in myself as a composer at the beginning. I graduated with a master's majoring in composition, but I had no confidence in my ability. So I thought, oh, I might as well kind of stick around the music and do something that I like, but something that I'm good at. And I was very fortunate to come across some philosophy, I suppose, Buddhism, essentially. Buddhism that told, essentially, what I learned from that was you should be true to yourself and you should be courageous. So after about 5 years of directing, I realized that I really wanted to be a composer. So I did that. I then did a PhD again at the University of York. And it was at that time that I really started to concentrate on, okay, I can do this. I believe in myself. My voice is the best voice that I can have. So let's get it out there. And everything from that year onwards, 2014, 2015, has just been living the dream in a small way, but a great way. So, yeah, being open, throwing yourself into everything, and believing in yourself at the same time, that helps as well.
Mhm. So your PhD at the University of York was in composition of opera for young people. Tell me about that specialization. I mean, you've already touched on it, but what are all the things that you need to learn to become a composition facilitator?
I love that question. Yeah. So composition for young people, the desire to study that came from, I suppose, what felt like two strands of what I do. One is education. One is trying to make art on a main stage, um, and a slow realization that in all, I'm going to be super honest. All of the work that I do, the work for main stage has a very different approach and a very different culture and a very different attitude. Whereas the approach to working with young people is just so fun, so nice, so supportive, so sympathetic, just literally better in every single way. One might argue that aesthetically, it's not always as top creme de la creme, but there comes a point where you don't care anymore. I'd rather have quality of life than have everything sound perfect all the time. And so, but then I also, um, through various experiences, felt that it was actually way more valuable to be creating work that is not hypocritical just because it's beautiful. It is actually worthy. It is actually peacemaking, social, outward looking, open to different cultures. I wanted to do all of that and concentrate my practice and my craft. So that was the PhD desire. Then, in terms of specific skills, I think my main focuses were on, again, focusing my craft, knowing who I am and what I have to offer to anyone. Uh, Also, trying to understand what kids are. That was a question I posed. What is a kid?
Mhm.
And trying to differentiate the needs of children at different ages. Um, Also, what then differentiates a child from an adult, and what are their different needs? Actually, there aren't that many differences, in my opinion. Um, the main one is that kids won't lie to you when they don't like it, whereas adults will. So, um, having a tough skin and being able to interpret when a child says, "I hate your music," is a very good skill to have, and being able to ask the questions subsequently. What specifically do you hate? Is it that you hate the sound, the volume, the boy that you were sitting next to? Did he pull your hair? And then actually acknowledging that in listening to music, it isn't just the music; it is the experience. It is the boy you're sitting next to in the auditorium. Um, so, but that discovery came through the research of looking through audience feedback through my performances, and so so yes, understanding kids, understanding myself, and trying to identify what is the relationship, what works and what does not work between me and kids. Um, so that's and then trying to pick up tips on what everyone else has done as well in the past. That was a big part of the research.
Hmm. And you use this word value. What do you think that special value is of arts education, and of a participatory education in the arts? Because that's something I've been thinking about a lot. It's usually relegated to something kind of extra, like
Mm,
you don't really need it. It's sort of something that you can have, like an extra side of something.
yeah,
What do you think? I mean, if you were to pitch the idea that maybe this is really essential, how would you do that?
I think the quickest example I can give is that, for example, an orchestra or a choir is the only
Hmm.
kind of mass communal activity where
Mm,
you're a normal mass communal activity where you're not competing against another team, where you are all on
hmm.
the same team and you're all competing with yourself at the
Hmm.
last repetition of the piece that you played. And you're all in that together. That's one thing. And I think that's incredibly unique. But then
Hmm.
another thing in terms of actual participatory music education or arts education generally, uh, you're you're focusing on something. Well, you're super highly motivated if the facilitators are good.
Hmm.
You want to make this cool techno baroque opera mashup thing because it's
Hmm.
wicked fun, and you are then driven through that motivation to actually engage with all kinds of almost invisible cultural problems, like working in a
Hmm.
team, managing people, exchange, dialogue, listening, all of
Hmm.
these things which, even aside from actual art and music making, are so unbelievably essential. The more that you can just get along with people, the more people you will get along with in life. So
Hmm.
it's actually not just about creating artists, it's using
Hmm.
art to create amazing human beings. That's
Hmm. And
the
collaboration.
yeah, exactly. That's the
Yeah.
joy for me is the
Hmm.
humans.
Hmm. I mean, but do you also think that art is just essential for a life that's, like I keep saying, worth living? I mean,
You're totally
um,
right. You're totally right. I guess I was having a conversation with a teacher yesterday, or 2 days ago, and I was saying due to COVID, and this might come as a surprise. I was saying to her that due to COVID, I feel like I've put my career on hold. I've put
mhm,
art on hold, and she said, "Well, that's not good. We should never put art on hold, especially now, now more than ever." And I found myself thinking, why did she disagree with me? What did I actually mean? And I
mhm,
did mean that I have put my career on hold, but never, ever, ever, even when I've been working in like kebab shops
mm,
or in any job, never have I put art on hold. It's always just found
mm,
a way. Uh, I remember specifically when I was working in a kebab shop about 8 years ago, I would rap to the customers
mhm,
because just music had to find a way.
mhm,
Now I'm not making shows for main stages, but I'm teaching music in schools. So
mhm,
every single day, music is finding a way in my life. It's just that there's what I realized that there is cognitive difference. Maybe it's an illusory one, is what I was thinking afterwards,
Mhm.
between making art in my daily life and making art for my
Mhm.
job.
Yeah.
And so art never stops, but art for
Mm.
my job, the job that I'm kind of conceiving
Mhm.
as an artist, that has been put on pause. I don't know
Mm.
about you with, well, I guess this is the case for lots of people right now.
Yeah. Well, in a way, it shows new perspectives, though, too. I mean, I feel like I've become a lot more cognizant of this thing that you're talking about with art in everyday life. You know, I think music education in particular, but I think arts education in general, it trains us to create this really stark division between, you know, good art and bad art, and high art and low art. And I think that there comes a point where you have to kind of shed that, and it's very and it's hard. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
process, you know, and it's hard because you've actually been striving for this ideal your whole life, and
yeah,
especially in music, it's so competitive,
yeah,
and there's always this sense that there's like this perfection that you're trying to get to. Um, that's very prescribed. You know, it's not very creative, especially if you're just quote unquote just a performer.
yeah,
A lot of things are prescribed for you, and you end up feeling hungry to really be creative, and to have to, I don't know, take ownership of what you're really doing, and not
yeah,
just being this kind of puppet. Um, and I think actually in that sense, the pandemic, this pause was a gift in that sense, because you had to kind of go in again and sort of create a new relationship with your art, where maybe there aren't any listeners at every moment, you know, but you realize that there's a part of it that you just need in your life, that it's just part of
yeah.
being human somehow. I don't know.
Well, I guess it's I there are two. I mean, what you say is wonderful in the sense that in terms of listeners, re-clarifying what is a listener for one.
Mhm.
What, you know,
Yeah.
that's one thing. I realized that I've got an audience of 300 every week that I'm
Hmm.
basically performing
Yeah.
to, in these kids,
Hmm.
and their lives are better, you know, for having have had a little bit of music in their week.
Yeah.
Could be your partner, could be your kids, could be
Hmm.
anyone, these listeners. But then I'm also struck by what you say about this prescription of excellence, and I
Hmm.
find it so frustrating. It makes me, it's no lie to say it makes me furious. I'm being a bit English and kind of calm right now, but I'm so sickened by the way that the education system actually forces us
Yeah.
to believe this, forces us to believe that classical music is the best, that some style of singing is better than others, that some voices are better than others, that
Hmm.
some compositional styles are better than others.
Hmm.
Okay, you might like them more, but that doesn't mean that someone else will like it more. And so, what
Mhm.
is best?
Yeah.
There is no empirical best, and that's a massive lie that we've been sold. And it's it's very difficult to break yourself out of it, to
Mhm.
let
Yeah,
yourself
it
think,
is.
well, I don't need to be performing to the Royal Opera House. I am
Mhm.
fine performing to my son. You know,
Mhm. In fact,
it's
there might be more value to it in some
precisely,
way.
precisely. Yeah, that's exactly the point.
Yeah. And that's also what I keep thinking about with local art scenes, which I think will have to be led and nourished by independent creators,
Yeah.
because this kind of, I mean, at least in opera, um, but I think that in a lot, I mean, in all of the performing arts, certainly, you have the centralization of to like a couple institutions which are taken seriously, which have the most money and have the most kind of security, um, and then what happens is, and I see this in a way also happening here in the Czech Republic, is this sense that you end up with a cultural desert locally. We actually don't have this so much here because we have a lot of opera houses. But then I think of places in the United States, for example,
Mm.
which are just cultural deserts. I mean, they are deserts,
Yeah.
and and that has to do with this sort of centralization to the coasts.
Yeah.
And I think that something like that is also can happen globally as well. And I
Yeah.
mean, certainly when you live in a small country like the Czech Republic, you also feel how there's this encroachment of American culture,
Mm. Mm.
which of course for me it's complicated because I am half American, but I
Mm.
also feel, you know, I do feel strongly that I want to participate in a thriving local scene that's really
Yeah.
ours, that isn't
Yeah.
dictated by the by aesthetics
Yeah.
coming outside. Um, and so I guess that leads into some of this sort of independent creation and the importance of that, um, which connects to the whole audience thing, because we have this tendency to think that there's such a thing as a good audience, as the
Mm.
right audience, as a prestigious audience,
Mm.
and those
Mm.
usually you kind of coagulate in these particular institutions,
Yeah.
which are considered, the like you said, crème de la crème.
Mm.
And then but then these, I think we need to sort of embrace the local audience, and our extended families,
Yeah.
and people that we know and that aren't considered aficionados or don't consider
Yeah.
themselves aficionados.
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah. So I, in theory, would go even further. I say in theory because I don't know if I've yet been able to do that myself. But during the first lockdown last year, um, I had, I think we were all, as you say, thinking about our lives and our careers. And for some reason, it occurred to me that there's this privileged pyramid that we all live in, where we privilege these institutions, exactly as you say. And as a result, by privileging them, we deprivilege
deprivileged.
ourselves. And we certainly deprivilege those with less knowledge and less access to the institution than us. So, um, unfortunately, that's our audience. So,
Yeah.
we consider our audience less important than the institution.
Hmm.
And I think the institutions probably will also feel the same way. If
Hmm.
we're all in the same boat and we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, we're not
Hmm.
inventing this stuff. We've all learnt and think the same way. So it takes a
Hmm.
lot of effort to go, do you know what? I'm not going to do this for the institution. I'm going to do this for the people right in front of me who want to hear
Hmm.
what I'm doing, and to consider that the most valuable thing. The tricky thing is, where does the money come from to
Yeah,
allow us to do that if we want to be professionals? If
exactly.
we want to um, do it for the love of it, that's fine. But if we, um, for the time that we put in, even if it's not uh, what we have used to think of as professional, it
Hmm.
would be it would be a lovely way of living if every
Yeah.
single amateur, in inverted
Hmm.
commas, could be paid for their music and thus be a professional. You know,
Hmm.
that completely changed what a professional means. I think we'll never get past the fact that some institutions will exist, and collections of people will have collective knowledge and collective expertise and be really good at what they do. But with that comes responsibility, rather than thinking, oh, they're the best and therefore I'm not as good, so I shouldn't even try.
Hmm.
And they're not as good, so I shouldn't try to engage them as an audience.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, this question of money and investment, I think you just touched on. That's the big question for me, and is one of the reasons why I've struggled to actualize my theory of privileging the community, because I need to live and I haven't quite figured out
Yeah.
how to make that my job, like
Yeah.
full time kind of thing, in the way that I would like to.
Well, let's talk about how you did succeed, though. I mean, you have done and started some projects, and you've done these sort of hybrid projects with opera companies, like I think outreach and education and this kind
Yeah.
of thing. You founded Opera Schmopera, if that's how you pronounce it.
Opera schmopera. It's like a kind of
Schmopera.
Yiddish thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Opera schmopera.
Okay. Schmopera. Okay. Um, so, I mean, tell me about your experiences of getting these things off the ground. I mean,
Mm,
how does one go about it? What do you think is needed, and what do you think is really just consistently lacking? We've talked about this before, but
mm. Well, so opera schmopera, what opera schmopera came about because that's my philosophy. I love opera, but I don't really.
mhm,
It's not the. It's not my only thing. So from every now and again, opera, wow! But then every now and again, it's opera schmopera.
yeah.
Um, so I wanted to, I guess, share that philosophy and just do stuff with people. So
Hmm.
the first thing I did was get some social media stuff and try and just pretend that I'm an institution, and and then Opera Schmopera does some really awesome stuff. But after a while of a few attempts of like trying to put on a few scenes here
Mhm.
in a little festival or a little activity there, a workshop in a school, um, the momentum starts to pick up, and you can kind of launch yourself into bigger and bigger things. So starting small was basically where it all started in about 2009. Then in 2015, at the beginning of my PhD, I decided I would really go for it. I would
Mhm.
really launch myself, and I'd, well, yeah, launch Opera Schmopera too. Um, Also, as a composer, I was finding that no one was commissioning me, like
Mhm.
no one. So, thanks to the University of York, which taught me that if no one's commissioning you, then just do it yourself. Don't
Mhm.
wait. Um, the right audience isn't there. You kind of got to make the right audience. I thought, okay, right, I'm going to just commission myself, and then I have the skills as a director to produce stuff, and I know loads of people now, so I'll rope them in, and we'll work together, and then a magical piece of wisdom came to me in 2015 when I started trying to do all this stuff. I remember someone asking a question in a conference: how do we enter? How do young artists enter the industry? Really? How do we get somewhere in the industry? And someone just said, well, don't wait for us. Just work with your friends, do it together. And I
Mhm.
don't know why it took me that person to tell me that, but I suddenly looked around at the conference and thought, oh, there's a director, there's a singer,
Mhm.
there's a producer. Why don't we just do something together? And if you can find people who kind of, they don't need to even want to do exactly the same thing, they just need to get something out of it for themselves. That singer wants some coverage, that director wants to direct something, I want to compose something, that writer wants to write something. Let's
Mhm.
figure out what it is that we can do together, and then try and do it. And the magical thing about that is, from a funding point of view, as soon as you've got a few partners,
Mhm.
people just want to throw money at you.
Mhm.
That was the lesson of the big project that we did in the second year of Opera Schmopera's kind of real launch.
Was that
A,
Full of Stars?
a Shoe Full of
Yeah.
Stars, yes. I felt like I had a really good idea, and I had some really good collaborators. And the more collaborators I got, the more collaborators wanted to be on board, the more partners wanted to be on board. Um, and yeah, people just were throwing money at us, relatively speaking.
Mhm.
Considering that the first production that we did for Opera Schmopera had a budget of £500, and the
Wow.
second had a budget of 50,000.
Wow.
So that kind of goes to show what collaboration and partnership, and not just what they can do, but actually how key they are. If you've got good people around you, everyone wants to be involved.
Mhm.
And then how you get good people around you, I feel the one lesson that I learned from that is have an idea that people really want to do.
Mhm.
Believe it in yourself, but have an idea that is useful for as many people as possible, not just useful for you. I A Shoe Full of Stars was a show about how to talk about terrorism and
Mhm.
terrorist attacks. So obviously, in 2017 and 18, everyone wanted to talk about terrorist attacks, but no one knew how.
Mhm.
I knew that this was a big thing, so I thought, okay, I'm going to make a show out of it. I did a load of research, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, I want to be able to talk about terrorist attacks. I don't know how. Don't know where to start. Don't want to offend anyone." And in the end, we made this show all about that, which has
Mhm.
kind of no answers, but just raised so many questions and allowed people to talk and think. And yes, that show was, I think, well, it took a lot of skill in order to figure out how specifically to sell it.
Mhm.
Uh, it started off as the show about the show about terrorism, which nobody wanted to buy into,
Mhm.
obviously. But through determination and pitching and pitching and pitching to different people, I learned how to pitch the show, what it needed to be. Um, so that's a little bit of kind of glimpses of a process of
Mhm.
trying to launch something from £500 to 50,000.
Mhm.
Um, just got to keep trying, keep pitching, adapt.
And
all
who
the
do you
time.
pitch to usually? I mean, I guess it's different project for project, but
So this is the yeah, massive question. I have to say it's very useful if you've got a PhD to do. Then you can ask this question for yourself really determinedly and like spend time thinking about it.
Mhm,
It's part of the reason why I did a PhD at all is to ask
mhm,
myself, how do you do this job?
mhm,
Not just the making the art, but like making it happen.
mhm,
And I learned that in the UK, there's a very specific system of funding, which is basically there is a national body called the Arts Council, and they have a very open and um, accommodating uh, office that will help you answer the questions that they ask for you to then be awarded the money that they will give you.
mhm,
And just asking them all the questions and then basically doing what they recommend uh, really helps. I got
mhm,
refused the first time when I applied, and then they gave me some feedback, and I followed the feedback, and then I got
mhm,
it. So that really helped.
mhm.
But the system in France, where I'm living now,
Yeah.
is different. There's no national funding body. There are regional funding bodies, and I uh, and then there's towns. And I haven't quite figured out how they all relate to each other, but I think the principle is basically the same. There are some people that you need to talk to that
Mhm,
want to give you money, and they will help you to figure out the best way in which they are going to do that. So basically, I just need to go and talk to whoever it is who has the money in these regional uh, arts financial bodies, and the councillors, my local councillors in this
mhm,
area of France, and they'll tell me how to sign the forms, and then I
mhm.
can pitch my thing and probably get a few refusals, but just keep
Yeah.
trying, keep trying, keep trying.
Mhm,
Those are the kind of the big money
mhm,
ways to do it. Otherwise, there is crowdfunding, which
mhm,
is also like incredible because not only does it build you money, but it builds you your audience at the same time, and they are already super invested in the show that you're making, so
mhm,
they'll want to help you. Um, and then there's small pots of money here through things like advertising and possibly
mhm,
sponsorship. But
mhm,
for me, coming from a UK system,
mhm.
uh, the secret to money is just finding those people who just want to give it to you, rather than finding like I'll promote your business through my show. I find that very, very complicated, but it
Mm.
is possible for some.
Yeah. What have you learned through this process about what people want to fund? Like, I mean, you talked about how it has to help others and not just yourself. But I mean, are there any other aspects or any other kind of advice maybe you could even give young creators about the kinds of how to build a project that's likely to get supported like this?
Yeah, I think that um, for me, this is a personal conviction. It may not be held by everyone who makes shows, but this is how I like to work. I like to be able to uh, have a show. Let's put it this way. I would like to have a show where it would be stupid for you not to give me money. Like that's so I have to figure out. Okay, I've got a show, and I currently have a show which has not been produced, which is about magic lanterns, which are an 18th century object that was the precursor to the
Mhm,
projector camera thing.
mhm,
So I haven't figured out how to make that object and this opera about this random object set in the past for kids, an opera where it would be stupid for you not to give me money. But that's where I have to work really hard on my pitch.
mhm,
The why. It's not the what. Like yes, it's an opera. Yes, it's quality. But I along the way picked up this philosophy of when you pitch something, start with the why,
mhm,
then the how, then the what. So
mhm,
why am I doing this? There's this incredibly important reason why I'm doing this. There's a massive problem. This is
mhm,
why we're doing this. How this problem gets fixed? Well, you have to do this, 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 and this. And what? Well, I've got an opera which does all of that. This opera is the answer to all of your problems. That's
Mhm.
basically how I sold A Shoe Full of Stars. And man, it worked. So knowing how to pitch things and adapting as you go, certainly one skill in terms of like getting money. Then, as I said, having and demonstrating not just your experiences, because obviously I think that goes without saying, like I'm qualified, blah, blah, blah,
Mhm.
but also who else you've got on board who's qualified, who can basically be like that's almost better than your qualifications.
Mhm.
If well, let me put it this way: A Shoe Full of Stars. I was a composer who'd only composed one piece uh, of any scale
Mhm.
for no money, but for some reason I'd convinced this writer on Twitter who writes for the BBC, who I listened to one of his plays on the radio, and I sent him a tweet saying, "Do you want to work on an opera about terrorism?" And he went, "Okay." So I
Mhm.
just straight away used him like BBC writer, blah blah
Mhm.
blah blah blah. Ed Harris, amazing, award winning. And it's just such an amazing insurance. Like everyone's like, "Oh, okay, this is
Mhm.
going to be a good opera." So again, they just want to throw money at it because it gives
Mhm.
them the confidence that yes, there's a good reason for it, and there's a good team. I think the rest is just an organization and having the skills
Mhm.
to actually put it all together. But yeah, that would be the three things that I would say
Mhm.
to find money.
Yeah. How do you deal with this sort of balance between being the organizer and being the creator and the artist?
Oh God, that
That's
is
I, yeah.
that's the ultimate question.
Yeah.
Ah, um, at the beginning, I did everything myself, literally. I think the first thing I ever did at university, I even choreographed myself.
Mhm.
Um, sigh, sigh, sigh,
Yeah.
sigh. That was a tough time. Um, but you know what? I would never do it again, but I would never change it. Like I'd
Mhm.
never change it. You sometimes you just have to try. Well, this is what I think. This is what I've lived by. If no one will do it for you, then you do it yourself. And then you know what you're looking for and you know why you never want to do it again. You're extra motivated to get those collaborators to work with you. And suddenly you're way more persuasive and you can say, oh, no, but like, yeah, try it, do it yourself, learn the lessons, and then don't do it again. So every from so now my balance is that I am not composer and producer.
Mhm.
I'm a composer or a producer. I am no longer both of those things. That comes from experience, but also I guess the scale that I'm starting to work at now, I can't afford
Mhm.
to do both. Whereas when it had a budget of £500, I really could do that. I
Mhm.
was even the fundraiser. I baked quiches for my university department and sold quiche every lunchtime to raise that
Mhm.
money. So I was
Oh.
the baker for that production as well.
So, I had a question, follow-up question with that. Oh, how do you find some? Because it seems like every project needs like that one really rational, organized person, and that can sometimes be. I mean, it's in a way, it's easy to find artists who you want to
Yeah,
work.
yeah,
It's harder to find people that are really competent in that way and also get it. And
yes.
so, have you had
God.
luck with that, or have you?
No, no, I haven't had luck with
Yeah.
that. But then I haven't had to yet. Um, that's uh, for some reason this word's just sprung into my mind of hustling. Like that's what we do basically, and I think we have to become masters of it. We have to hustle, whatever in whatever way, and the way that you hustle will be the different to the way I hustle,
Mhm.
and that's fine. But we all got to hustle,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I so far have not managed to hustle a producer to produce things for me. But my family have always said that I'm a super disorganized person. Everyone has been amazed with what I've organized over the
Mhm.
last few years, including myself. But certainly all of those people around me. So that's to say, you can amaze yourself with how
Mhm.
organized you can be when you are determined. And a test that I did, sorry, I'm rambling now, but a test that I did a few years ago helped me to figure out that um, I don't consider myself organized. I consider myself motivated. But actually, sometimes I can be so motivated that I can be incredibly organized. It's
Mhm.
just that I don't like that word organization
Mhm.
sometimes, so I don't consider myself. I don't behave like an organized person.
Mhm.
But actually, I can end up doing exactly the same thing, just through
Mhm.
another way. But then some also that's where collaboration helps, because you can bounce things off other people, and they can say, "No, Omar, that's a stupid idea. You don't market the tickets the week before the show. You need to do it a little bit in advance." Oh yeah, okay, I'll do that. So yeah, that helps working with others and pitching things
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah, you keep a check on each other, basically.
Exactly. Yes, precisely.
I'd like to actually circle back to education because you also, from what I understand, you also do seminars teaching people how to teach.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that the case?
yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your philosophy there, because this really connects to the projects you're doing. Because most of them, from what I
Mm.
understand, "Shoe Full of Stars" was composed by the children that partially
Pa-
composed by the
Partially,
children,
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, that
yeah,
sang in it
yeah,
also.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, what is how what do you know about educating children? What is your philosophy there?
Um, the I think, well, I guess it all comes down to what I experienced when I was first facilitated musically by
Mhm,
my mum.
mhm,
Um, Listen to what the kids are saying, try to understand their impulse, and just kind of hold it and let it
mhm,
blossom. Um, that and I think that's the best way of doing anything. So it's an education where I'm not actually teaching frequently. I'm not teaching kids anything about music actually, and
mhm,
yet they are incredibly creative and can end up writing a song. But I've not taught them meter. I've not taught them solfege. I've not taught them any musical knowledge that we would consider,
mhm,
but yet they can do it.
mhm,
Um, so um, for me, that's really important. And of course, when they're then super motivated and they understand, oh, I've written a song, but it sounds the same as the other song, I can say, ah, well, how about we do it in three instead of four? What's three instead of four? Oh, well, let me tell you. And
mhm,
so they're hooked. So that's my approach. Get them hooked, um, and then they are trapped in the desire to learn. And so, yeah, when it comes to training teachers and other artists, I it's exactly the same approach. It's absolutely no different. Just with the teachers and the artists, I show them a little bit of a breakdown of exactly what
mhm,
tricks I play on people to
mhm,
trick them into. Well, it's not. It's illuminate. I illuminate the creativity from within, rather than tricking them
mhm,
into believing that they're creative. But it feels a little bit the same.
mhm. What
um,
are some of those? Just like a selection, if you don't mind sharing. What are some of
yeah.
the tricks that you have?
Okay. So, for example, I have a technique which I think is super useful when it comes to teaching a melody line, which I call the squiggly line technique. So, say, what's the first line? What's the first short sentence that comes to your head right now,
Mhm.
Emma, for you?
Oh, oh, oh no.
Okay, let's pick a subject. Let's pick a subject. What's the subject first? Let's write a song about.
Let's write a song about my dog. That's
Great. Okay.
flying over there.
Tell
Uh-huh.
me one little thing about your dog, or maybe something your dog would say to you if it could speak right now.
Um, so about my dog, Toadie is named after an opera singer, so she's an opera dog.
Okay, Toti is an opera dog.
It's an opera dog.
Tony is an opera dog. That's our first line of text.
Mhm.
So the way that I would use the squiggly line technique is you kind of use
Mhm.
your finger to do a little squiggly line.
Mhm.
Toady is an opera dog. Toady is an opera dog. That's kind of like a very monotonous song.
Yeah, yeah.
So the best thing to do with songs is to kind of make the melody line, the
Mhm.
squiggle, go up and down. So
Mhm.
Toady is an opera dog. Should we go up on any of the words according to
Toad.
you?
would go up on Toady.
To- to-
Toady is an opera dog. Yeah.
Toady is an opera dog. Toady is an opera dog. Maybe we could even make dog longer after we repeat it 3 times. So Toady is an opera dog. Toady is an opera dog. Toady is an opera dog. And on we go.
Very
So there we
It's
go.
very
We've
operatic.
written the beginning of the song. There we go.
Okay, I bet they have a lot. So do you do this individually with each one, or do you do this together? You can do this in a group
You can
too?
do this in a group. It's fantastic in a group. Just like 30
Mhm.
kids. I think I've even done it with like 50 or 60. And they're just like, what's it going to be? What's the song going to be? And as we were, no one knew what Totally the Opera Dog song was going to go like until just now. And it is literally magical.
Uh-huh.
Everyone's so
This is
excited.
This is also how you wrote parts of Shoe Full of Stars?
Yeah. So,
You would have to talk to them about terrorism then, right?
exactly. Yes, that was
Yeah.
and that was the point of the whole mission, I suppose. Yes, for that process, that's very specific. Uh,
Mhm.
starts with well, my process always in terms of making opera starts with the theme, then the libretto or the script, and then music, and then staging.
Mhm.
Um, I'm inspired by the text in order to compose the music. So we spoke for 2 months, lots of discussion on everything that these kids thought about terrorism and
Mhm.
how they talk about terrorism, where they hear about terrorism, all kinds of things about the subject. Not just like terrorism, what is it, but like when it happens, what does it do to you, that kind of thing. Then a writer it wasn't a very participative process, that part, I must admit, but he was an
Mhm.
award-winning writer and he turned all of their thoughts into an award-winning script.
Oh, okay.
And then we took that script and I composed about 40%, 50% of the music with the kids using the words that
Mhm.
he'd given, and they'd adapted a little bit here and there, um, basically for time. It's a long, long process, and we
Mhm.
had not a lot of time. So, then the kids looked at little bits of the text, and I said, "How does that go?" And either they would go, "Oh, it goes like this. It sounds like the Avengers," or "It sounds like a heavy metal song here." So
Mhm.
okay, I'll try and facilitate that. Or they would sing a line, or I would drag the melody line out of them. Um, so there are lots of different ways of kind of getting the stuff, but in the end, it means that uh, they were so attached to it that when we were nominated for an award, one of the kids flew to Spain without telling us to arrive at the awards ceremony. And so we just met them at the awards ceremony, like, what the hell are you doing in Spain, dude? But he was like, I have to be here. It's my opera. Wow.
Mhm.
Okay. This is, yeah. So,
Was he
yeah,
one of the leads?
he was the lead. Yeah. Yeah. He was the lead.
So when you listen to the opera, can you tell which parts are composed by you and alone, and which parts were in collaboration with the children?
I think no, actually.
It's pretty
Um,
seamless.
it's seamless because there was a composer uh, harmonizing it all, I suppose. So um, also, I have to admit, let's be honest. The kids had no musical experience, so
Mm.
they were not able to harmonize stuff. They were not able to think about orchestration. So that was all left to me. When I say that they wrote the music, they wrote all of their melodic lines, and of
Mhm.
course, kind of invented some harmonies. But to all intents and purposes, that is the essence
Mm.
of the song. The rest is just
Mhm.
dressing in a way.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, so that's how that worked.
that's really cool. I'd love to play some of that maybe here.
Yeah, cool. There's a few sections that seamlessly cross over between stuff that is very me and stuff that is
Has exploded one town
that
over
they
with an
wrote.
unknown number hurt in the attack linked to terrorist agents. Security forces have been deployed across the island, and the public is advised to remain vigilant for further threats or suspicious activity.
I'm sorry, Splotch darling. Did you want to say something?
Just feeling a bit funny, I guess.
You can't fight fire with fire. You can't punish tit with tat. Revenge just breeds revenge, and that's no way to react.
If only it were so complicated. Let me be exact. If someone hits you, you give them a smack back.
Everyone says that if we do this, we're doomed, or that if we do that, we're doomed.
Right.
And I don't really care what we do, so long as we're not doomed.
Okay.
So, I guess my question is...
I know.
You do?
Definitely.
You do?
It's about fear, isn't it?
Yes.
You want to speak to the Ministry of Mindfulness.
No, I don't. Can you see the glint, the gleam, the glitter, glistening in the gloop dark?
During our first conversation, we talked about this, how hard it is for these indie creators to really stay afloat for long periods of time. It's one thing to do it project by project, but one kind of issue that we identified was that it's really hard to keep that going. And also that there's a lot of, I don't know if we use this word, but a brain drain, which is not very nice, but it's more like that certain people get sucked into the industry proper and have a proper career that way, and then they kind of leave behind these empty spaces. So can we just talk about this a little bit? Recreate what we talked about the first time.
Absolutely. Well, so the two things, as you say, are sustainability on an individual level, and then avoiding the brain drain once success comes and you leave and no one is there to take your place. So on an individual level, I have to admit I feel like I'm at the beginning of understanding what a sustainable indie opera career could be like. Because after A Shoe Full of Stars, I did feel very burnt out. It was a lot of money. There was a lot of pressure on me to produce something that was going to be worth the money, and thankfully we did. But it did make me think, okay, I'm a few decades away from doing that again, if that. But I'll be happy to do things on a much smaller level in the meantime and just kind of keep things ticking over. But I think my immediate response is that I don't want to, just like I've done with so many other things, I've learnt what burnout is like. I don't want to do that again. So I'm going to take it really, really easy and not try to fret that I'm missing out on opportunities or anything. I think that's the worst thing that all of us feel like. I'm missing out on my career, thus I'm missing out on my life. We're not. Life will go on, and nobody will be thinking, "Oh, where's Emma's career right now?" Apart from Emma, and same with Omar. Nobody's going, "What happened to Omar?" Apart from Omar. And so if you can get rid of that for yourself, the pressure is off, and you can just okay, I'll do it when I'm ready. And for example, I've been applying for a bunch of things in France. But because my French is so bad and life has been a bit chaotic, I got loads of rejections. And rather than thinking oh, I'll never make it, I just thought, okay, clearly I'm not ready. I'm not ready to have any responsibility beyond what I'm already doing in terms of producing stuff. So I just give myself a break, give myself a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years maybe, and I'll come back and people will be like, oh, Omar's back. And they probably won't even know that he was anyway. So that's my approach. I don't know if that's the right approach, but that's just where I am right now in terms of personal sustainability. Also, just believing that whatever job that you're doing is the job that you really are kind of, it's the best job for you right now. Not to say that you can't do any other job, but it's, if God was to come down and make the perfect job, the perfect job for a human being to realize the fullness of their life and potential, then that job is what you're doing right now. Even if it's sweeping streets, or when I was working in a kebab shop, it was the perfect job for me at that time. I then had, after a year and a half, the energy to kind of launch myself into other things, and that was fine too. Then in terms of successes, this is a big one. And it's very frustrating when you see people who start to succeed uh, and then are sucked into an institution, given a responsibility, or sucked into a company of some kind, and given some thing to keep that again privileges them and the work that they do, and they have more responsibility. But not only do they leave behind them a vacuum where they were, uh, but also this is a secondary thing. Sometimes because they're learning, they're not even as good as the people whose job they've taken. So they become less responsible in the new job, and there's no one taking their old responsibility in their past job. I find that very frustrating. And there are I'm speaking specifically of certain uh, company directors in the UK that have kind of climbed the ladder, and then the ladder has just been destroyed behind them, in my opinion. Does that resonate with you? I mean, I feel that maybe that's a very directory kind of perspective, but
Well, oh, you mean like if there's like a singer equivalent to this?
I guess, yeah, or if you see it around.
What I was thinking as you were talking is how we're kind of conditioned to feel that the only real career is and the only really desirable career is in the industry. Which I mean, for especially for performers, that kind of realistically is the case in terms of how comfortable it is because you're getting better paid
Yeah,
and you're able to focus really just on the thing that
yeah,
you want to focus on, which is your performance. And but at the same time, I do think well, we have to get away from that kind of thinking as singers because we just have an overproduction of singers right
yeah,
now.
yeah,
There's too many of us,
yeah,
and there aren't enough smaller scenes. It's sort of there's a shrinking of the actual market, even as there's just more singers being produced and
yeah,
more educational opportunities for singers and this kind of thing. I've talked about this a lot, and this is a huge issue because it's a waste of potential. You end up wasting a lot of people's potential.
yeah,
So I would say to performers, if they're at all inclined to also being organizers and directors and producers and this kind of thing, that they should do that. And I think if enough of us do it, we can kind of fertilize the scene enough that it actually becomes something that
yes,
is that is satisfying. Because in the
yeah,
beginning, let's face it, it can be extremely demotivating. I don't know if that's a word in English, but it can be very kind of soul crushing because you end up spending more time on the minutia of sending out emails and pitching your work endlessly, and then you're like, well, am I even a singer anymore?
yeah, yeah,
And it because it does take a kind of quiet concentration to be a performer. It takes a lot of kind of away time. You can't
yeah,
have the buzzing in your head all the time, and that's definitely something I struggle with. Probably more because I'm also a performer, and I assume that I would maybe struggle with it less if I were a director or a composer, because you get to step away from. I think you do also perform though in some of your shows, right?
I get roped in
Yeah.
sometimes.
But the nice thing is that you're making this thing, and once it's a show, it can sort of live on its own,
Of
and
course, yeah,
you're not putting your body out there and
yes,
your physical energy
exactly,
out there during the show.
yeah,
Whereas that's the thing that's really challenging for us performers,
yeah,
balancing the energy that you need to be on stage, or just to perform, and the energy that you need to do all the things around it if you are the
yeah,
one organizing your own performances. And it gets
yeah,
easier. I mean, it gets easier as you do it more than every time I organize a new concert. I have a duo that we do art songs. It's easier. So but it is very kind of, it can be very discouraging in the
yeah,
beginning, I think. And that's why a lot of people just sort of focus on and clamor towards the industry. Understandably, it's very rational to do
yeah,
that. Also, a lot of people kind of give up, and they think it's like industry or die,
yeah, yeah,
sort of give up and they go away.
yeah.
Um, and that is a very, very sad situation to me.
Well, it's precisely what leads to the desert and the lack of cultivation. If
Mhm,
we consider that if we are not in an institution, then culture is dead, and art,
mhm.
and we are dead as artists, then no wonder there are cultural deserts. Like
Exactly.
we've
Yeah.
kind of let ourselves die. artistically. That's exactly exactly the problem, and it's easier said than done. Like
So
it's
much easier said than done.
it's the I got this job teaching in Paris, and at the beginning, I was feeling like this is not what I should be doing. I should be doing something else. And then I kept on getting these rejections from other places. I was like, oh no,
Mhm,
okay, this is the only thing I should be doing right now. So it took, you know, this idea of where we should be and what we should be doing, and like fame and fortune making our lives easier. We're
mhm,
all it happens to all of us.
mhm,
Um, but it really helps to then have something to reflect you back onto. Oh no, this is where you should be. Where you are is fine. Who you are is fine. What you're doing is fine. So take off that pressure, and then hopefully it would just kind of leave you freer to do a good job where you are,
mhm,
including I don't know, organizing, say if it's a small show, organizing that as well as you can, concentrating on that as well as you can, and that being literally as good as it needs to be.
mhm,
And of course, I'm saying that and thinking like, oh, the last show I did, there were loads of things that I would rather not do again. But then we're
yeah,
exactly as you say, we're learning every single time, and
mhm,
that is fine. That is actually more than fine. We should be
mhm,
doing more of that,
mhm.
really, more of that everywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd like to see it done more, because there's this sense that if you're not good enough, especially if you're a singer, I think for directors and composers it's a little bit different, but I think especially if you're a singer, then the idea is that if you're not good enough, then you don't make it into the big industry. That is, I think that makes a lot of people lose heart before they've really proven to themselves whether they can maintain their voice and what they can do with their voice, or if they're a dancer with their body or with their
Mm,
instrument or whatever. And I've, like, during this kind of pause time, I know that it's been a great time to reconnect with my instrument in a way that I wasn't before. When you're doing auditions and when you're singing in theaters, there's just no time.
mm,
And if you have that time when you're not making it, quote unquote, um, it can be a wonderful opportunity to really just kind of deeply reconnect with what you're
yeah,
doing in a
yeah,
way that you just don't have time for when you're in the middle of things.
yeah. Trying to hustle.
Um, yeah, yeah, exactly. So in that sense, we've all been given this time, which a lot of people it's forced on a lot of people, even when there isn't COVID,
Yeah.
when they don't have the kind of opportunities that they want.
Yeah, that's the positive way of looking at it, and I think that's the way it saddens me when I see some colleagues on social media and stuff grieving because they don't look at it like an opportunity. This
Mm,
current situation. Of course, there are things we're losing. There are things we've lost, including lives. There's a lot to grieve
yeah.
for, but um, but some things we don't need to grieve for. We can just let go, like the idea that we should be somewhere other than where we are. That's not helpful.
Or that we need to be somewhere in order to do the thing that we love. I think
Yeah,
that's the
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Or I mean, also we can. It is very complex, isn't it? Because we can do the thing that we love, but not even realize that we're doing it. Uh,
Mhm.
like I say, like I'm working with kids, I'm composing with kids all the time, every week, and it's taken me a little while to go, oh yeah, I'm doing it already. I'm already
Mhm.
doing it. So why do
Mhm.
I need to feel that I should be anywhere else?
Mhm.
Sometimes just kind of being able to see the present moment for what it really is, and how actually it's all right.
Mhm.
I'm doing it, and it's good, and my audience is absolutely loving it, and who else do I need to impress
Mhm.
apart from myself? Like, really, just
Yeah.
kind of get that in my head. I think you're right that for singers, it's um, the way in which singers and instrumentalists, possibly too, performers and dancers generally, the way in which performance is so personal. That's
Mhm.
tough. That's a really, really tough thing to overcome. And with direction and composition and production, you can kind of
Yeah.
let it go a little bit. It is a very different energy, but I think I don't know. I like to imagine that it's possible to be able to kind of just um, sing beautifully for your family, sing beautifully in church, sing beautifully, or dance beautifully wherever, with whoever, at the cashier's till, on the bus. Uh, you can get a lot of art into your life if you want to.
Yeah, it has. I think it has a lot to do. We talked about this with your relationship with the audience, that you have to take everyone that
Yeah,
seriously, every one of the people that's
yeah,
listening or watching you.
yeah.
And that's something we're kind of trained not to do. We only care about like the critics that come to the
Yes,
show
yes.
and the people that have power over, so like
Yeah,
the director and the conductor,
yeah,
right? That's what
exactly.
you're supposed to care about when you're
Yeah,
a singer. And
and
you don't really care about all those other people.
yeah, exactly. All the human beings that are
Yeah.
there to hear you.
For whom supposedly it's supposed to be. It's supposed to
Yes,
be for their entertainment, for crying out
precisely.
loud,
Yeah,
right?
or their inspiration or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, that has been a shift that I was sort of forced to make during this time, and maybe you, in some way, have experienced this shift too. That I think is a real gift. Like,
yeah,
um, I mean, to the point where I'm thinking of doing street performing.
yeah,
Like, you can do that in Prague. I don't know. I think in Paris it's more complicated,
yeah.
but in Prague, I found out it's like open season in certain
Wow,
places.
wow.
Surprised it's not like one next to the other.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
And
I'm thinking of doing that. Yeah.
how inspiring to have someone with your artistry and talent on the street corner, just like, even if it's just once in a while, just like,
Hmm.
when you see someone on the street playing as a
Hmm.
musician and you're like, whoa, they're good. I don't know if
Yeah.
is everyone else seeing this, and like,
Hmm.
usually people don't get it, but every now and again
Hmm.
you'll get someone who will really get it.
Hmm.
And that must
Yeah.
be so rewarding. I remember giving some guts a guitarist like 20 pounds or something, because I just thought, your guitar playing is the most wonderful thing I think I've ever
Hmm.
heard. Um, yeah,
And this also requires something of us as listeners, because we are always listeners at all times. Let's say we can think of ourselves that way, and to think of what we can give the people that we are appreciating, whether it's on stage or whether it's a street performer or whatever. Um, um, to I don't know. I hate using the word energy because it's like so woo, but to give that good audience energy, to be a really good listener to other artists.
yeah,
Um, that's I mean, to me, that's part of building this community that's much more um I don't know, humane and local,
yes,
and less about like these institutions hoarding money.
yeah,
And I don't say that I don't necessarily say that in a derogatory way, because I've enjoyed plenty of art from Met broadcasts
mm,
and all this. It's not that it's not art or that it's somehow degraded by it,
no,
but the problem is that it's just not being distributed. It's not
yeah,
it's not everyone is allowed to participate.
yeah. That's a,
So
that's.
yeah.
I mean, not people not being allowed to participate with art is a blockage
Hmm.
of not just humans and people, but humanity. And I think what
Hmm.
you are talking about is bringing humanity back into art, and that also
Hmm.
means that getting the art out there. It means distributing it.
Hmm.
Um, One thing that just occurred to me is that uh, a couple of years ago, again because of Buddhism, and I was really struggling with my self-identity of what it is that I'm doing. I think all of those struggles really helped me to realize that I'm way more than an artist. I'm a human being, and my masterpiece is my
Hmm.
life. That's
Hmm.
the real masterpiece, is to live an amazing life and fully live the rejections and fully live the successes and fully live whatever diversions.
Hmm.
It's got nothing to do with my career. Well, the career is part of my life, but
Hmm.
the life is the masterpiece, and every single human being who's present is part of this incredible artwork, and we must listen to and embrace, because
Hmm.
they're all there. We're all here. So I think if institutions, and all of us, actually, all of us throughout the industry, and even amateurs and students, could just remember that our life is the most important thing, and the lives of others are the most important thing that we can engage with, then I think we'll start to cultivate the
Hmm.
culture that you're talking about, that we want, full of life again.
I think that's a good. I could talk to you for just more, like 3 more hours about this stuff, but I think that's a good place to end. We can have another conversation once you're done with more projects.
I
And
love that. Yeah.
thank you so much for being my first guest
Thank
and
you,
for
Emma, for having me.
kicking this off so well.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real privilege and pleasure. Always just so interesting to talk to you as well. It's great.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that convo. I know I did. Listening back to it, I thought of so many more questions I should have asked. So if you want to know more about Omar and his work, I've put some links in the description. Right now, you're listening to a little keyboard voice improv Omar and I dashed off after a conversation. We have a phrase in Czech, kouzlo nechtěného, which can be translated roughly as the charm of the unintended. Well, the unintended here was that I didn't realize my echo cancellation was on, so my side of the track is very warped, like I'm an underwater creature or something. I unofficially named this little improv Ondine for that reason. Such are the happy accidents of this long-distance lifestyle we are all still kind of getting used to. If you want to keep up to date with the On the Verge series, the best way to do so is by signing up for the newsletter. I send it out on the 13th of every month, and it sums up all the latest blog posts, videos, backstage videos, and podcasts. And please, if you're an artist who connects with any of what you heard on this podcast and you too are on the winding path of finding your own way as an independent creator and have some projects behind you that you want to talk about, contact me. You just might be the next guest. All relevant contacts, links, information, everything is at onthevergetrilogy.com. No W's. Also in the description. Here's to being on the Verge.